अवतार वरिष्ठाय रामकृष्णाय ते नमः. Namaskar to all of you. Welcome to the study of Great Master Sri Ramakrishna. Shardanand Ji Maharaj is trying to prepare us for the Madhura Bhava of Sri Ramakrishna. So now let us all proceed to Dakshineshwar, where Sri Ramakrishna is about to practice the Madhura Bhava. Yet there is some more preparation is to be done for us to understand what is Madhura Bhava and why did Sri Ramakrishna take up this practice. We've already studied so to some extent. Now we'll proceed further to study and understand what it is all about. The Madhura Bhava is said to be the greatest contribution of the Vaishnava teachers like Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to the spiritual world. Had they not preached it, many people would have been without a means to God realization and the peace and bliss resulting from it. They were the first to understand that the Vrindavana Leela of Sri Krishna was not acted in vain, and also to make efforts to explain it to others. But for the advent of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Vrindavan would have been regarded as an ordinary forest, endeavoring in imitation of the West to record only outward events. The historians of the modern age will say, now we have to note the point that how are the modern historians trained in the Western method record history. Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling that endeavoring in imitation of the West to record only outward events. The historians of the modern age will say, but there is no evidence that the play of Vrindavan actually took place as you say. Therefore, don't you see that so much of your joy and sorrow and the moods, including the Mahabhava, are all without a basis? The rishis of our Indian traditions, the Vaishnava teachers would say in reply, can on your part produce sure evidence that these incidents mentioned in the Puranas did not take place? Okay, you tell that there is no history or there is no evidence. Can you prove there is no evidence that these incidents which have been given in the Puranas have not taken place? Until we are convinced that your historians have explored the history of these ancient ages thoroughly, we would maintain that your doubts in regard to these incidents mentioned in the Puranas are unjustified and invalid. Moreover, even if you should ever produce such proof, our faith will be unaffected. Suppose you produce some proof that these incidents have not taken place, then even then it will not disturb our faith. Moreover, even if you should ever produce such proof, it is impossible because all these things have taken place and you cannot produce a proof against it. You have to manipulate, just like the present day non-believers and the modernists do, to suppress so many truths to prove their own points. They take deceit. They use all hook and crook to suppress all these truths. Truths cannot be suppressed. Truth will always triumph in the end. Satyam eva jayate na anritam. Truth always triumphs. So, moreover, even if you should ever produce such proof, our faith will be unaffected. It will not affect at all the eternal play of the Lord in the eternal Vrindavan. That mystic divine play will remain eternally in the ideal spiritual realm, can any invaders, can any people who want to establish their own religion and destroy all other faiths enter into the field of ideas and destroy all that? What has happened? No, nobody can destroy it. It will not affect at all the eternal play of the Lord in the eternal Vrindavan. That mystic divine play will remain eternally in the ideal spiritual realm. If you want to witness the truth of this play of love between Radharani and Lord Krishna, you can do so in the realm of spiritual consciousness, even now. But before that, you will have to make yourself fit. You'll have to make yourself fit for the same. First of all, by eliminating every vestige of lust. You have so much of lust within you. Every vestige of that lust has to be removed from your body, mind, and speech, and learn to perform selfless service by following in the footsteps of any one of the female friends of Srimati Radha. You will then see that Sri Vrindavan, the playground of Sri Hari, is eternally there in your heart, and that the said play is being enacted within you every day. He who has not learned how to be independent of the external events and how to study with a pure heart the history of the devotional moods by a thorough acceptance of ideal world as real will never be able to enjoy the beauty and sweetness of his play at Vrindavan. While Sri Ramakrishna was describing that play of divine with great enthusiasm to the English educated young men who were with him, he found that they did not relish it. Whereupon he said, "Why don't you mark and grasp the attraction of Srimati?" That is Radharani. Srimati is another name for Radharani, Srimati. Why can't you mark and grasp the attraction of Srimati's heart for Lord Krishna in that divine play? Forget about all other things, historicity, that and this. Why can't you grasp, take the essence, that is the devotion, the love for the Lord? That is more than enough. That is what we want in spiritual life. So take only that. That was what Sri Ramakrishna used to say to his English educated disciples who would not like the Leela of Srimati or Radharani with Lord Krishna. So Sri Ramakrishna, whereupon he said, "Why don't you mark and grasp the attraction of Srimati Radharani heart, Srimati Radharani's heart for Krishna in that divine play?" When one has that kind of attraction for God, when one has that kind of attraction for God, one can realize God. That's enough for us. We want to realize God. Just copy, imitate the devotion essence. You need not literally do the things, but take the essence of the devotion of Mother Radha towards Krishna. Then you can realize God. That is what we want. Now, let me go through Sri Ramakrishna's words. Why don't you mark and grasp the attraction, that is the devotion of Srimati Radharani's heart for Krishna in that divine play? When one has that kind of attraction for God, that kind of devotion, that kind of attachment towards God, one can realize him. Just see how mad the gopis were for Lord Krishna. How mad the gopis were for Lord Krishna. Renouncing their all, they gave up everything. renouncing their all husbands, children, family, propriety of conduct, that is lajja, propriety of conduct, honor and dishonor, shame and aversion, fear of public opinion, and of society, and so on. They forgot everything, they renounced everything for the sake of the Lord. When one can be so, one realizes the divine Lord. If continued, one is not free from the least tinge of lust. One cannot understand the spiritual mood of Mother Radha. Again, we shall note the words of Sri Ramakrishna. It is very, very important. If we are not free from the least tinge of lust, even an iota of lust is there in our mind, one cannot understand the spiritual mood of Mother Radha, the embodiment of Mahabhava. As soon as they saw Lord Krishna, who was the embodiment of existence, knowledge, bliss, Satchit, Ananda, that is Parabrahma Swarupa, Paramatma Swarupa, the gopis felt a joy in their hearts, tens of millions of times greater than sexual pleasure. Note the words. Just by the presence of Lord Krishna, as soon as they saw Krishna, the embodiment of existence, knowledge, bliss, the gopis felt a joy in their hearts. How much? Tens of millions of times. That is infinite times, tens of millions of times greater than sexual pleasure. They then lost their body consciousness. Could the idea of sex enjoyments by the contemptible body cross their mind then? When they are having infinitely greater joy and bliss than the sexual joy, could those lower joys, the idea of sex enjoyment by the contemptible body, cross their mind at least? It couldn't even flash. It is nowhere comparable. Suppose you have kept elixir and you have the gutter water. Will anybody even look at the gutter water to drink when you have elixir to drink? Could the idea of sex enjoyments by the contemptible body cross their minds then? Divine light coming out of Sri Krishna touched their bodies, producing in every pore of their bodies infinitely greater pleasure than that of sexual enjoyment. Divine light, divine energy, divine light coming out of Lord Krishna's body touch their bodies, the gopis' bodies, producing in every pore of their bodies infinitely greater pleasure than that of the sexual enjoyments. At one time, Swami Vivekananda was very scientific, was very logical, was well educated. He would not accept anything until he had the proof. You know how stern Swami Vivekananda was. He would not believe. Just simply somebody told. He would examine, he would test. He put Sri Ramakrishna many times into very difficult tests. So Swami Vivekananda at one time raised an objection in regard to the historicity of play of Mother Radha and Lord Krishna at Vrindavan, and made an attempt to disprove its authenticity. So now Ramakrishna Paramahamsa told in reply, very well, let us take for granted that there was never anyone called Radha. and that some loving sadhaka had an imaginary conception of Radha's personality. Let us let us think. Let us take that Mother Radha didn't exist, and all that the thing was some imaginary conception or poet of some loving sadhaka. He might have imagined the conception of Radha's personality. Let us imagine. But while picturing that character, but while picturing the character of Radharani, the sadhaka, you must admit, had to lose himself completely in Radha's mood. When you start thinking of Mother Radha, even as an imagination fiction of some sadhaka, a spiritual aspirant, a loving character, some loving sadhaka, even then, if you start picturing that character, now the spiritual aspirant, you must admit, had to lose himself completely in Radha's mood, and thus he himself will become Radha. He will lose in the mood of Mother Radha, and he himself will become Mother Radha. It is thus true that the play at Vrindavan was that enacted in the outer world also. Now, any sadhaka taking up that mood of Mother Radha has to become Radha, he will lose himself. But don't you think that Mother Radha is real now? Suppose you, forgetting everything, forget everything. You start picturizing the ideal of Mother Radha. It may be imaginary now. She might have not existed, don't worry about that. But start picturizing. And what happens? You lose yourself, your individuality, and you yourself will become Mother Radha. If that is the case, the advent of Mother Radha is true. You have become Radha now in the external world too, not only in the plane of idea. What a beautiful way Sri Ramakrishna has put it. It is thus true that the play at Vrindavan was thus enacted in the outer world also. Indeed, though innumerable objections regarding the Divine Lord's play of love at Vrindavan may be raised, the Madhura Bhava first discovered by the Vaishnava teachers led by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and others and manifested in their pure lives will remain eternally true at all times. The aspirant qualified for it will attain the hallowed vision of the Divine Lord. Feel blessed by looking at him as husband and himself as wife. And with the final development of that mood, be also established in pure non-dual Brahman itself. So through that, he will get established in pure non-dual Ekameva Dvitiyam Brahma, non-dual Brahman, the one without the second, pure consciousness. Although for woman it is easy and natural to attribute the role of the husband to the Divine Lord and undergo the discipline accordingly, it appears to be unnatural for those who have male bodies. Now, Shardanandaji Maharaj is coming to the practical problem. Although for woman it is easy and natural to attribute the role of the husband to the Divine Lord, but it appears to be unnatural for those who have male bodies. The question therefore naturally arises in one's mind, why Chaitanya Mahaprabhu introduced such an unbecoming discipline in the world? It has to be said in reply that all the actions of the incarnations of an age are done for the good of the humanity. It has to be said in reply that all the actions of the incarnations of the age are done for the good of the humanity. That path of sadhana was introduced by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu for the same purpose. He made the aspirants advance on the path of Madhura Bhava keeping in mind the spiritual ideal which the aspirants of those times were for long eager to realize. It cannot be that the eternally perfect Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, an incarnation of God, engaged himself in practicing that mood for his own good and established it as a perfect ideal in society. Sri Ramakrishna said, just as the external teeth, just as the external teeth, the tusks of an elephant, of all the elephants, are for attacking their enemies, and the internal ones for masticating food and maintaining their bodies for their own purpose. We see that in the elephants, the tusk, strong tusk protruding out, they are the tooth, they are the teeth of the elephants. It is meant for fighting with the enemies, the external world, the enemies in the external world. But the internal teeth are for masticating and digesting the food. Sri Ramakrishna is telling, just as the external teeth, tusks of the elephants, are for attacking their enemies, and the internal ones for masticating food and maintaining their bodies. So, two kinds of moods. Two kinds of moods were manifested in Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the one inward and the other outward. He did good to humanity with the help of the outward mode of Madhura Bhava, and being himself established in non-dual state of Brahman, the fruition of the love for God, the fruition for the love for God, enjoyed personally the immense bliss in the inward mode of non-duality. So he had both the modes, one of the Advaitic mode in which he enjoyed it within, he was always one with the Ekameva Dvitiyam Brahma, pure consciousness, Parabrahma Swarupa, one without the second. But externally, he had this mode of Madhura Bhava, the outward mode of Madhura Bhava being himself established in Brahman. Historians say that there arose in this country teachers of the Vajrayana. In Buddhism, we see that in the beginning, there was this Hinayana, the highest teachings of Lord Buddha, which was meant for very high spiritual aspirants. Only sannyasins could follow it. So it was very difficult for the common mass. They were at a different level. So they were left out. So what to do? Then it grouped out, divided. The Hinayana, Hina means small, Yana means ship. It's a small ship, it doesn't carry the ordinary people, it is only for the elite or the best spiritual aspirants at a higher standard. But what about the common mass? So they started another path that is called Mahayana. Maha means big, Yana means ship, big ship to carry the ordinary mass. Then again, Buddhism went on dividing and redividing. So in Tibet and on the bordering Himalayan areas, the Vajrayana came up. So historians say that there arose in this country teachers of the Vajrayana at the end of the Buddhistic age. They preached that having attempted to realize nirvana, the final beatitude, and having almost been freed from the clutches of the desires, the human mind went forward to merge in the great void with the help of the meditation. But then Niratma, the goddess of non-existence, appeared before it, and instead of allowing it to do so, kept united with her own body. Thus, though the gross body in which the aspirant enjoyed worldly objects did not then exist, she made him daily enjoy the aggregate of the essences of the sensuous pleasures, inasmuch as he was even then possessed of a subtle body. Therefore, it was no wonder that the doctrine that this sect preached, namely the attainment of the subtle enjoyment of the ideal world, by this renunciation of the enjoyment of the gross objects should have become distorted in later ages, that the attainment of the constant enjoyment of the gross objects should have been regarded as the goal of religion, and that it should have resulted in the wide prevalence of loose sex relationship in the country. At the time of advent of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the uneducated people of the country adopted that distorted Buddhistic doctrine and were divided into various sects. The pure Vamachara, spoken of in the Tantras, became distorted even amongst most of the higher classes, and the quest of the miraculous powers and enjoyment of sensuous pleasures by the motivated worship and meditation on the universal mother came into vogue. In the midst of these cults, aspirants who wanted to attain the divine bliss by following any of the pure spiritual modes found themselves forlorn without guidance. It was in this situation that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared. He at first placed before those aspirants the ideals of extraordinary renunciation and detachment by practicing them in his own life, and afterwards pointed out that if one became pure, if one became pure and holy and looked upon oneself as a woman and upon God as one's husband, one can truly realize the unlimited divine bliss in the subtle ideal world. Moreover, he preached the glory of God's name to the people in general and induced them to repeat continually his names and sing aloud his praise. Many Buddhistic sects that had not got corrupted and fallen from the ideal were thus placed by his grace on the true spiritual path again. Though the group of the followers of the distorted Vamachara at first opposed him openly, they felt the extraordinary attraction of the unique ideal of his life, became self-denying, and tried to have the vision of the universal mother through motiveless worship. Therefore, while recording the events of the extraordinary life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, some writers wrote that the Buddhists, the upholders of the doctrines of the void, also rejoiced at the time of his birth, that is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's birth. So it is written in the book called Chaitanya Mangala. Therefore, while recording the events of the extraordinary life of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, some writers wrote that Buddhists, the upholders of the doctrine of void, also rejoiced at the time of his birth, that is Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's birth. Sri Krishna, the Supreme Self, the embodiment of existence, knowledge, bliss, is the only Purusha. What is meant by Purusha? I have explained. Pure Sheti iti Purushaha. One who resides in this Pura. Pura means township. This village or town. Pura means town, city. So this body is a city. Somebody resides in it. He is called Purusha. Pure is Pura town. Shete, one who lives. Pure Shete iti Purushaha. So the Atman which resides, the Paramatman who resides in this body is called Purushaha. So Purusha is existence, knowledge, bliss as a subject, the knower, the enjoyer. Prakriti is existence, knowledge, bliss as the object, the known, the enjoyed. Existence, knowledge, bliss, absolute means pure or absolute consciousness. When the will, which being a mode of consciousness is not anything other than the consciousness, is not active or is not cognized. When the will is active or is cognized, the same pure consciousness appears or is viewed as split into two, the subject and the object, and is talked of in terms of love with emphasis on the bliss aspect. So that is now told about Purusha. So Shri Krishna, the Supreme Self, the embodiment of existence, knowledge, bliss, is the only Purusha, is the real Purusha. All the men, though they may be having mustache and beard and so many other external features of a man, are but Prakriti only. Until you realize this Purusha, become identified with this Purusha, Atmaikya Bodha. Until then, we are all Prakritis only, even having a male body. Sri Krishna, the Supreme Self, the embodiment of existence, knowledge, bliss, is the only Purusha. The Lord is the only Purusha, the male principle. And all the jivas, the creatures, all of us, both gross and subtle, are parts of Prakriti, the embodiment of supreme love, and are therefore his wives. So, if the jivas become pure and holy and wholeheartedly worship him as their husband, they attain, by his grace, liberation and the state of unending and unalloyed bliss, which is their goal and their highest fulfillment. This is the long and short of the Madhura Bhava preached by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. All the other devotional modes are included in the one great mode, the Mahabhava, of which the chief Gopi, the chief amongst the gopis, Radharani, is the embodiment, personification. Each of the other gopis is an embodiment of one, two, or more modes comprising the great mode. The aspirant is thus enabled to master the modes constituting the Mahabhava by engaging himself in the sadhana in imitation of the gopis of Vraja, and at last he becomes blessed with the flash of great bliss arising from that great mode. The ultimate aim of an aspirant on this path is to become happy in all respects at the happiness of Lord Krishna. By giving up all desires for his or her own happiness once for all, through the contemplation of the mood of Mother Radha, the embodiment of Mahabhava. So, what is this Mahabhava, that highest mood, which is in Madhura Bhava? One, the attainment, the highest mood you are going to get is called Mahabhava. What is that? That is the state, Mahabhava is the state in which one fears lest any harm should befall Krishna even when he is happy, and hence cannot remain patient for even a moment. In the Rudha stage of the Mahabhava, that is the stage in which the Sattvika Vikaras have reached almost the highest point. The Adhirudha stage of Mahabhava is the highest point of the Rudha stage. It is that stage of bliss and pain arising respectively from the union with and separation from Lord Krishna, of which all happiness existing in crores of universe, and also the pain produced by the biting of all the snakes and stinging of all the scorpions, are just a drop in the ocean, so to say. The last mentioned state of Mahabhava has two characteristics. First, Modana, that is gladness to be found in the friends of Radha only. Secondly, Madana, inebriation, which is the most complete efflorescence of all the sattvika emotions and bodily changes to be found only in Radharani. So, this is how the Mahabhava is explained in Bhakti Granthavali of Sri Chakravarti. So, we have to understand what this Mahabhava is. I have given an inkling, I just read it. So, if you want to study it in detail to understand what is this Mahabhava, what is the way it progresses in spiritual aspirant's life, you can study this book again, or else you can go through the Great Master itself again, then you can understand it. Now, coming back to the Mahabhava, the love between a pair of lovers married according to the rules of society flows restrained by external conditions such as birth, family, virtuous conduct, fear of society, and public opinion. Such a pair live within the bounds of these rules and undergo sacrifices for each other's happiness, keeping in mind various things that should or should not be done. desirous of properly observing the hard and fast social rules. The married woman does not hesitate on many occasions to check or limit her relation of love with her husband. The married woman does not hesitate on many occasions to check or limit her relation of love with her husband. But the loving behavior of the paramar is different. The loving behavior of the paramar is different on account of the impulse of love. Such a woman very often disregards all social convention and does not hesitate to unite with her lover, even at the cost of all social security. The Vaishnava teachers have advised the aspirants to assume for themselves that all devouring, loving relation towards God. If that love of the paramar, which is illegitimate, the love of the paramar, which is illegitimate, if turned towards God, if you give that a Godwardly turn, the Vaishnava teachers have advised the spiritual aspirants to assume for themselves that all devouring, loving relationship towards God. Therefore, though Radharani, the Supreme Lady of Vrindavan, is the married wife of Ayan Ghosh, she has been described as one who renounced her all for the love of Lord Krishna. The Vaishnava teachers have described the Madhura Bhava as the aggregate, the totality of the essences of the other four moods and something also more than that. For the loving woman serves her lover like a slave. For the loving woman serves her lover like a slave, gives good counsel under all circumstances like a friend. So now, for the loving woman serves her lover like a slave. This is Dasya Bhava. Gives good counsel under all circumstances like a friend. That is Sakhya Bhava. Feels happy at his happiness and miserable at his afflictions. Engages herself like a mother in nourishing his body and mind. So this is Vatsalya Bhava. And thinks of his welfare in all respects. Thus, wholly effacing her own personality, she occupies herself in entertaining her lover in every way, bringing joy and comfort to him, thus keeping him flooded with extraordinary peace and bliss. The woman who forgets herself under the influence of love and keeps a perfect eye on the welfare and happiness of her lover is described in the devotional books as Samartha, the excellent, and her loving and her love as the best. All the other kinds of love, tarnished with tinge of selfishness, have been assigned to two other classes, that is, Samanjasa, the balanced, and Sadharani, the common. The woman of the former class minds her own happiness to the same extent as her lovers, and she of the latter class regards her lover as dear for the sake of her own happiness only. Now, we will go through that again. The philosophy of Madhura Bhava can be understood again if we go through that. The Vaishnava teachers have described the Madhura Bhava as the aggregate of all the essences of other four moods and something more. So, where are the other four moods? The first one we can see, the Dasya, where the loving woman serves her lover like a slave, Dasya Bhava, gives good counsel under all circumstances like a friend, that is the Sakhya Bhava, mood of friendship, then gives good counsel, that is over, feels happy at the happiness and miserable at his afflictions, engages herself like a mother in nourishing his body and mind, that is a Vatsalya Bhava, and thinks of his welfare in all respects, thus wholly effacing her own personality. She occupies herself in entertaining her lover in every way, bringing joy and comfort to him, thus keeping him flooded with extraordinary peace and bliss. The woman who forgets herself, the woman who forgets herself under the influence of love and keeps a perfect eye on the welfare and the happiness of a lover is described in the devotional books as the Samartha, the excellent, and a love as the best. All the other kinds of love tarnished with a tinge of selfishness have been assigned to two other classes, that is, Samanjasa, the balanced, and Sadharani, the common. Now, the Samanjasa, who is that balanced lover of God? The Samanjasa, the woman of the former class, minds her own happiness to the same extent, equally, as her lovers. She is called Samanjasa. And she of the latter class regards her lover as the dear for the sake of her own happiness, her selfishness, her possessiveness is important. Her happiness is important. For that sake, she loves the husband. So she is called the Sadharani, the ordinary, the common. So be that as it may, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu preached the glory of the names of God and taught the aspirants to guide their lives according to the ideal of austere renunciation and place themselves in respect of love in the position of the beloved of Krishna and thus tied to stem the tide of sensuality prevalent in the society at that time. His mode of devotion and instruction to the aspirants did endless good to humanity. It showed the right path to those who were astray, brought into the bounds of the new society, those who were excommunicated and who were living outside of the pale of the castes, those who were outcasted, who were called the lower caste, embracing them all within a new caste called the devotees of God. So when you become a devotee, there will be no caste distinction at all. Chaitanya Mahaprabhu embraced everybody and held the high and the pure ideal of renunciation and detachment before all the communities. However, that is not all. He proved beyond doubt that all the mental and physical changes called the eight sattvika vikaras. What is these eight sattvika vikaras? Whose tamasika counterparts are produced by the love and union of ordinary pair of lovers, actually came on the aspirants of pure mind in virtue of the intense meditation and contemplation of the divine husband, the lover of the universe. This converted at that time the Alankara Shastra. You may find that in the dance and the singing and the poetry, the Alankara Shastra. This converted at that time the Alankara Shastra, the science of rhetoric, the science of rhetoric into a spiritual scripture and giving the sensual, poetic, and dramatic literature the color of spiritual love, made it palatable to spiritual aspirants and conducive to their progress. It thus made the path of sadhana easy for them. It brought poetry and romance into the life of the aspirant, besides making it easy for him to love the Lord as one's own, as his nearest and dearest one. It enabled him to sublimate, give a high direction, to sublimate the baser passions like lust and anger by directing them towards the Lord. And like in the practice of Shanta Bhava, the mode of the calmness in which the passions are merely avoided or shunned. So you can know what is Shanta Bhava. In the Shanta Bhava, the mood of calmness in which the passions are merely avoided or shunned. So although in the eyes of some modern critics, the Madhura Bhava appears to be unnatural and unbecoming for those who have male bodies, it does not take long for a Vedantin to ascertain its proper value. He knows that as the result of a very long habit, all thoughts are converted into samskaras in the human mind. And that it is owing to these impressions that man perceives the diversities of the universe, which really is the one dual Brahman. If we can, by the grace of God, really look upon the universe as non existent, this very moment, he will experience its immediate disappearance into the void. The universe exists for a moment only because he thinks it exists. If a man, only because I look upon, sorry, I am a man only because I look upon myself as one, and another is a woman only because she regards herself as a woman. Again, it is a matter of daily experience that when one mode becomes predominant in the human mind, it wields and gradually destroys all other contrary ones. Therefore, an aspirant's effort to wheel and gradually destroy all other modes of his mind through the dominance of Madhura Bhava is looked upon by the Vedantin as similar to the effort of removing the thorn in one's foot with another thorn. The consciousness of I am possessed of a body, which is the basis of all the impressions of the human mind, and the firm belief I am a man or a woman on account of one's connection with this body are the two most dominant tendencies in the mind of man. When the male aspirant is able to forget his male nature by attributing the nature of the husband to the divine Lord and that of his wife to himself, he, it is needless to say, can very easily throw off as well the mood I am his wife and reach the state beyond moods that also is to be removed. Therefore, a Vedantin finds it quite reasonable that an aspirant, when perfect in the discipline of Madhurabhava, should arrive very near the plane transcending all the moods. We need some explanation of about what this Sharda Manandaji Maharaj is trying to tell here. Although in the eyes of some modern critics, the Madhura Bhava appears to be unnatural and unbecoming for those who have male bodies, it does not take long for a Vedantin to ascertain its proper value. He knows that as a result of very long habit, why did we get a male body in this life? Why did another person get a female body in that life? Because we are constantly thinking of that. It comes according to our nature, our likings, our habits, our karmas. What is karma? Repeated action. Why do we do any repeated action? Because we like something, we have some desire. So we are constantly thinking of that. So when we constantly love something, we try to attain it, we think, we work on that. And that is repeated habits. Repeated habits make character. And again, the deep character makes the samskaras. So it becomes deep rooted in your conscious mind and also the subconscious mind. Then you get your body, your external features, everything change. You know the science of physiognomy? Why do I have a nose of this shape, the eyes of this shape, the forehead of this shape, the head of this shape, the hands, the features, the whole body? Everything is made by seeing the feature, external feature. You can know what the nature of that man is. So concentrated thought, the thoughts, our work, our habits is the reason. The karmas, what we do, is the reason for everything we have, even a male body or a female body. So which we have been constantly thinking, all these gives that. So you go on changing the thoughts, making it deeper and deeper, and that can change. Even anything, it can be reversed. So it is the thought, the habit, the karma, the actions we do, which causes us to take, we have chosen it, to get a male body or a female body. Because of our nature, our liking, our karmas, we have got this. So you can change that also. What is the reason? Suppose you have a thorn in your body. So the idea that I am a male is obstructing you to allow to go to God. Then the other is just like another needle or a thorn. You take another needle, the idea, assuming that you are a woman, as a thorn, to remove this thorn, then finally, what do? You don't keep the other thorn because it has helped you. You'll throw both of them and go beyond that. That is non-dual consciousness, God, Paramatma Swarupa. That is being explained very nicely in a psychological way. Shardanandaji Maharaj is explaining it to us. He knows that as a result of very long habit, all thoughts are converted into samskaras. When you repeatedly do some actions, it becomes habits, and those habits repeatedly done will make samskaras in the human mind, and that it is owing to these impressions that man perceives the diversities of the universe, which really is the one non-dual Brahman. Because you want to look at the world like this, you are looking at it. For example, if you take the body of a swan or a goose which flies for a long time in the migration, the way it looks the world while flying is different from the way we look while we are looking forward only. The eyes of the birds, the eyes of the different owl is made in a different way according to its way of functioning in the external world. So likewise, according to the need, according to the liking, the whole world changes. Our indriyas, our senses will be made in such a way. The cow has been given eyes in a different way, the body in a different way, for its liking, for its character, for its samskaras, everything has been made. So likewise, even in the human beings, we get a male body or female body according to our liking, our samskaras, our actions, our karmas, and we can change that by positive habits. So by changing your habits, by changing your thoughts, by changing your likings and disliking, you can change the whole feature of yours. So that is what that psychology is being taken up. Why alone go to that extent? When they are children, when they don't come to the age of puberty, they have both male and female characters in the child. There's both equal manifestation of Shiva and Shakti in a child. It is just the hormones. The hormones secreted as testosterone makes a man or a boy. If the hormones called estrogens is secreted, it makes, that is the reason for the female aspect. There are places we have seen so many people changing. A woman in Kerala, I read in the newspaper long back, taking an injection or the hormones, she changed herself into a man. Anything can be done. Man can be converted into woman or woman to man by just hormones or injections. It is there in the biological science. So if that can be done by a chemical, a small gram of chemical in your body, then can't it be done by deeper thoughts, by your liking? You can change anything. So human mind is so strong that the repeated thoughts and strong habits can change everything. So that aspect is stressed here in Madhura Bhava, the thorn of the idea that you are a male body and identifying this with the body is removed by the idea of another needle or a thorn, that of the female attitude, to which you will take it to attain God. Remove this idea of man body and attain that Parabrahman which is beyond this male and female. So that is the idea here. So Shardanandaji Maharaj is telling that as a result of very long habit, all thoughts are converted into samskaras and human mind, in the human mind, and that it is owing to these impressions that man perceives the diversities of the universe. We see all this universe as in a different way because of our desires. If our desires differ, then the whole universe will look like a different. The whole universe will look different for me. For a chick, the whole universe is different because its needs and its desires are different. The whole universe is different for a different lizard. It is just not like a human being. For the snake, it is different because of its liking and its samskaras. It is different. Likewise, we create this world. This whole world, external world, looks like that with sorrows because in my mind, it is there. So everything is created. The whole world, external world changes according to the way you change. The universe exists for a man only because he thinks it exists. If a man only because I look upon myself as one and another is a woman because she regards herself as a woman. If they stop regarding it and change the way they think, they become the same, they change. Again, it is a matter of daily experience that when one mode becomes predominant in the human mind, it wields and gradually destroys all the other contrary ones. Therefore, an aspirant's effort to wield and gradually destroy all other modes of his mind through the dominance of Madhura Bhava is looked upon by the Vedantin as similar to the effort of removing the thorn in one's foot with another thorn or a needle. The consciousness of I am possessed of a body, which is the basis of all other impressions of the human mind, and the firm belief I am a man or a woman on account of one's connection with this body are the two most dominant tendencies in the mind of man. When the male aspirant is able to forget his male nature by attributing the nature of the husband to the divine Lord and that of the wife to himself, he, it is needless to say, can easily throw off as well the mood of I am his wife and reach the state beyond all moods, that is existence, knowledge, bliss, consciousness, that is Satchit Ananda. Therefore, a Vedantin finds it's quite reasonable that an aspirant, when perfect in the discipline of the Madhura Bhava, should arrive very near the plane transcending all modes. That is the science, that is the psychology of Madhura Bhava. I think it's very, very difficult to understand. I've tried my level best to make you understand. You have to think on that. So to understand it, read it again and again, go through that, then only we can understand. It's very, very tough in the beginning, but after some time you'll get an idea when we proceed further. Is the aim of aspirant, it may be asked, the realization of the devotional mood of Radha? The Vaishnava teachers, however, do not advocate the practice of it. They maintain that the mood of only a friend of Radha is attainable and not that of her own. Still, it has to be inferred that the latter is the ultimate aim of the aspirant. For the difference between the mood of Radha and that of a friend, her friends, is only of degrees and not of kind. Like Radha, her friends also worship Krishna, the embodiment of existence, knowledge, bliss, as their husband, and try to bring about the union between Radha and Krishna in order to make the latter happy, inasmuch as they felt most happy when united with her. Lord Krishna, they felt most happy when united with Radharani. Again, we see that although Rupa, Sanatana, Jiva, and other early Vaishnava teachers spent their lives at Vrindavan in the services of the different images of Lord Krishna, they did not install an image of Radha by the side of Krishna. Why is it? It is inferred that they did not do so only because they considered themselves as to be in the position of Radha. When they are taking the mood of Radha, then why should they install an image of Radha by the side of Krishna? Those people who are not taking the attitude of Mother Radha in Madhura Bhava, where to install Mother Radha's picture by the side of Krishna. So, who were all the disciples or followers of the great Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, Jiva Goswami, and other early Vaishnava teachers who came in the lineage of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu spent their lives in Vrindavan in the service of different images of Lord Krishna. They did not install an image of Mother Radha by the side of Krishna. Why is it? It is inferred that they did not do so only because they considered themselves to be in the position of Mother Radha. Those who want to study in detail the Madhura Bhava spoken of in the Vaishnava book should go through the writings of the early Vaishnava teachers like Rupa Goswami, Sanatana Goswami, and Jiva Goswami, and also the poems of Vaishnava poet like Vidyadipati and Chandidasa on the Purvaraga, the dawn of divine love. Dana, offering or dedication. Mana, the affection, rejection of beloved's endearment due to the excess of emotions. Abhimana, the wounded feeling of love. And Madhura, pangs of separation. These songs on the pangs of separation are collectively named as Mathur or associated with the city Mathura because the gopis of the Vrindavan experienced those intense pangs when Krishna left for Mathura, from where he never returned. So we have discussed the essentials of Madhura Bhava here because it will make it easy to understand what a wonderful pinnacle of excellence the master reached in the practice of that mood. So the details of Madhura Bhava has been explained here. Now we shall go to the proper life of Sri Ramakrishna, where Sri Ramakrishna practiced this Madhura Bhava. So now you can clearly understand why Ramakrishna practiced in that way. And also we can, by the practice of that Madhura Bhava in the life of Sri Ramakrishna, we can clearly understand what is Madhura Bhava. Both it is complementary. The master's sadhana of Madhura Bhava is the chapter now. The master was accustomed to remaining completely absorbed in any spiritual mood that happened to be taken up by his pure and one-pointed mind. That particular mood fully occupied his mind for the time being and wiped off all other moods and converted his body into a perfect instrument suited for its manifestation. Now we can see how in Ramakrishna's life, as he took up one mood, his bodily and everything external, internal changed to suit that mood. The master was accustomed to remaining completely absorbed in any spiritual mood that happens to be taken up by his pure and one-pointed mind. That particular mood fully occupied his mind for the time being and wiped off all other moods and converted his body into a perfect instrument suited for its manifestation. When we study his life, we find this mental trait was present in him from his very childhood. We observed this nature of his almost daily. When we were visiting Dakshineshwar, while merged in any particular spiritual mood as a result of listening to devotional music or for any other reason, he felt extreme pain. If anyone sang or talked in a manner suited to any other mood, suddenly if there was change in that talk or song or mood, it would cause pain because it was established in that mood deeply. It is called Bhava Bhanga. Now you are singing some raga. Let us say it is Shivaranjini or Bhairavi or Bhairava. One raga is being sung. You are now immersed in that mood. You go deeper, deeper into that mood, and suddenly somebody you will hear another raga which is contrary to that. Then it will pain. It will cause you can notice, it will cause you a lot of pain. But at the higher level, here Ramakrishna was established in that spiritual mood is much more deeper. When somebody talked and sang song of another mode, that would cause pain in Sri Ramakrishna's mind. So we can see that evidently he experienced pain because the flow of his mind in a particular direction under the influence of one mood was suddenly obstructed by the introduction of another mode. Patanjali, the great thinker, the psychologist, that is the main proponent of Raja Yoga, has described the mental state having only one current of thought centering on one particular object as Savikalpa Samadhi. What is Savikalpa Samadhi? Patanjali Maharshi in Raja Yoga describes it as mental state having only one current of thought centering on one particular mood, one particular object as Savikalpa Samadhi. The mental state having only one current of thought centering on one particular object as Savikalpa Samadhi. The same has been described as Bhava Samadhi. The same Savikalpa Samadhi in Raja Yoga is described as Bhava Samadhi in devotional scriptures. It's the same. This shows that the master's mind was accustomed to merging in that kind of ecstasy from his very childhood. The above mentioned characteristic of his mind took an extraordinary new turn from the time he commenced his spiritual practices. For whereas in his early days his mind was found to remain in one mood only for a short time and then to change into another, it was now noticed that a mood once inducted continued to persist till it progressed to its utmost limits and ended with a glimpse of the non-dual consciousness beyond. As example of this fact, it may be said that until he reached the farthest limit of the Dasya mode, he did not try to practice the Aptya or the mode in which one looked upon God as a parent, mother. Again, he did not engage himself in the practice of Vatsalya and the Madhura Bhavas before he had the final experience of the Aptya as taught by the Tantras. Instances of this can be easily multiplied if we study the events of the period of his sadhanas. When the Bhairavi Brahmani came, the master's mind was deeply engaged in the contemplation of the motherhood of God. At that time, he saw the actual manifestation of the Divine Mother in all creatures, sentient and insentient, just like Ganapati, the attitude of Ganapati. So Ramakrishna was immersed in that mode. At that time, he saw the actual manifestation of Divine Mother in all creatures, sentient or insentient, but especially in those having the female form. Therefore, we clearly understand the reason why he addressed the Bhairavi Brahmani as mother. As soon as he saw her and fully believed himself to be her son, sat at times on her lap and took food out of her hand. Inspired by the devotional mode of the gopis of Vraja, the Brahmani, Bhairavi Brahmani, happened at times to sing songs conveying the idea of the conjugal relationship with God. When the master would say, as reported by Hriday, that he did not like that mode and request her to stop them and sing instead songs expressive of the motherhood of God. The Bhairavi Brahmani rightly understood the master's mood and started immediately singing songs indicative of the mood of the female attendant of the mother of the universe, or she introduced songs full of outbursts of affection of Yashoda or the Bala Gopala. These are, of course, events that occurred long before he became engaged in the discipline of the Madhura Bhava. His transparent and unalloyed sincerity is evident from this. As he himself used to say, there is no swindling in the abode of my mind. So the mind was so immersed in one particular mode, it would not allow to jump into another mode. So that's why Ramakrishna is to always tell his transparent and unalloyed sincerity is evident from this sticking on to one mode for some time. As he himself used to say, there is no swindling in the abode of my mind. We have already seen how the master passed through the attitudes of the servant of God and also of the child of his. Now let us describe the practices he undertook when he engaged himself in the discipline of Madhura Bhava, sweet mode or the conjugal mode. Although the master was almost illiterate, almost is to be noted. It's only illiterate. We are all literates, but not educated. Though Ramakrishna was almost, he could read Sanskrit, he could read Hindi, he could write and read Bengali, he could write and read Hindi, he could write and read Sanskrit. So he was almost illiterate, but he was the most educated. We are all literates, but most uneducated. So now, although the master was almost illiterate, as that word is ordinarily understood, a study of his life reveals how he maintained the authority of the scriptures all his life. Even his early spiritual sadhanas, undertaken without the help of any guru and guided solely by the pure impulses of his heart, were not in contradiction with the Shastra scriptures. They only prove their universality. So the universality of the scriptures are being proved by this, because there is no contradiction at all. So even though Ramakrishna had not read all the scriptures, but all his spiritual sadhanas, all his spiritual modes are in tandem or matching or complementary to the scriptures, the Shastras. So that proves the universality of the scriptures. Even his early spiritual sadhanas undertaken without the help of any guru and guided solely by the pure impulses of his heart were not in contradiction with the scriptures. They only prove their universality, the truth that success will attend the efforts of anyone in this field. It is to be noted again, what does it prove? They only prove their universality, the truth, the success will attend the effort of anyone in this field, provided one's heart is pure, holy, and full of aspiration without any swindling. So they only prove their universality, the truth, the success, that success will attend the efforts of anyone in this field. Anyone can attain success, only the thing required is purity, holy and your holy thoughts and full of aspiration, your effort, and there should be no swindling, without any swindling, insincere thoughts. And there is nothing to wonder at in this, for a little thinking will show that the scriptures have been compiled out of such original experiences only. What are scriptures? They are the original experiences noted down of the great seers and saints, that's all. So, and there is nothing to wonder in it, for a little thinking will show that the scriptures have been compiled out of such original experiences. The texts included as the Shastras or scriptures are nothing but the records of the experiences of hearts like that of the master. They are the results of their efforts for the realization of the truth. The master, however, was unlettered and therefore without any previous knowledge of the scriptures. But yet he attained to the realization of the very truths recorded in them by his independent efforts. So it met at the same, they converged at one point, whether he didn't read the Shastras, because it is experience, universal experience, it's the universal truth, that they have found out, it has to come there only. Suppose a mathematician or a scientist has found out some truth. So let us see, a mathematician has found out that 25 into 25 is 625. So now an unlettered, not a mathematician, he has learned some tables and he puts 25 into 25, will he get something 1025? No, he gets the same result. It is just like that. So because the spiritual truths and the scriptures are universal, Ramakrishna, though unlettered, have not read the scriptures, is going to the same place. He's getting the same experience because they are universal. The master, however, was unlettered and therefore without any previous knowledge of the scriptures, but yet he attained to the realization of the very truths recorded in them by his independent efforts. This extraordinary life, therefore, goes only to prove the universality of experience recorded in the scriptures. It is therefore only a confirmation and not a contradiction of the scriptures. Swami Vivekananda pointed this out when he said, the reason of masters incarnating this time as an unlettered person, the reason for the master incarnating this time as an unlettered person is to prove the states and experiences recorded in the scriptures to be true. This is the statement of Swami Vivekananda. I'll read it again. The statement of Swami Vivekananda. I'll quote it. Swami Vivekananda pointed this out when he said, the reason for Sri Ramakrishna incarnating this time as an unlettered person is to prove the states and experiences recorded in the scriptures to be true. As examples of the master's instinctive adherence to the authority of the scriptures, we may mention here how he put on different kinds of dress, one after another under the impulse of different moods. The seers have said through the Upanishads. What is stated in Upanishad? The seers have said through the Upanishad that one cannot attain perfection by tapas only, by external austerity only, if it is without the adaptation of external emblem also. What is that scriptural statement? It is stated in Mundaka Upanishad, which comes in the Vedas, Mundaka Upanishad 3-4, where it exists. Self-realization is not possible by knowledge only without putting on the signs of sannyasa. Example, ochre cloth, etc. It has to be, the external things also are to be there. That is given by Mundaka Upanishad. So the seers have said through the Upanishad that one cannot attain perfection by tapas only if it is without the adoption of external emblems also. It is seen in the life of the master that impelled by his own heart, he put on the dress and other external emblems very favorable to the practices of whatever spiritual mode, and he undertook at that time. For instance, he wore red cloth, ashes, vibhuti, vermilion, kumkum, sindoor, and rudraksha beads. You know what is rudraksha beads? I need not explain the mala, rudraksha mala, as laid down in the tantras. While doing the tantric practices, he used to wear the red cloths, the ashes, the vermilion, the rudraksha beads, which is prescribed in the tantras, while he was practicing the filial attitude towards God as the mother. At the time of his practice of devotional mode of the Vaishnava books, he donned bhek, the well-known traditional garb of the Vaishnava ascetics, consisting of white cloth, white sandal paste, garlands of beads made of the holy basil, tulsi, etc., desiring to realize the non-dual mode taught by Vedanta. He put on ochre dress, the girva cloth, give up his sacred thread, the Janevu or Yagnopavita, and the tuft of his hair also was given up on the crown of his head. Again, just as he assumed various male forms of dress at the time of practicing the male modes, so did he not hesitate to adorn himself with the female forms of the dress and ornaments while practicing the female modes. The master taught us many a times that one could not realize God till one gave up the 8 ties of shame, lajja, hatred, grana, fear, bhaya, and the egoism due to birth, the caste and other things, egoism due to birth. You don't give up, you cannot realize God. Family, good conduct, etc., which accompany one from life to life. How far he himself followed that teaching all his life in body, mind, and speech can clearly be understood by a careful study of all his actions, including that of the wearing of special dress, ornaments, and other appropriate emblems at the time of his different sadhanas. Engaged in the practices of the Madhurabhava, the master became anxious to use clothes and ornaments proper to a woman, knowing that desire of his, the greatly devout Mathuranath had the pleasure of adorning him at times with a precious sari and other with a skirt, a gauze scarf, and a bodice, desires of making his female mode of dress perfect in all respects. Mathur decked him with a wig of long hair and a set of golden ornaments. This gift of Mathur, we know from a reliable source, gave evil-minded people an opportunity to calumniate the master's austere renunciation. But he and Mathur did not pay any attention whatsoever to that censorious talk. Mathur was highly delighted at the satisfaction they gave to father, and that was sufficient justification for the gift in his eyes. Dressed in this way and adorned with such ornaments, the master became so intensely identified with the mode of Krishna's love-lone woman votaries of Braja, the gopis, that his male consciousness totally disappeared. The male consciousness of Sri Ramakrishna at that time totally disappeared from him. His thoughts, words, movements began to resemble a woman's in every respect. We have heard from the master that he was in this woman's attire for 6 months, with his mind absorbed in the feeling that he was the spiritual consort of God. We have mentioned elsewhere the extraordinary coexistence in the master of both manly and womanly temperaments. It is therefore to be wondered at that under the influence of the womanly dress, the temperament of the fair sex should be roused in him. But nobody could ever imagine that under the urge of that mood, his movements, speech, smile, glance, gestures, and other actions of the body and the mind would become completely womanly. That all this did take place, however impossible it may appear, was borne out both by Hriday and the master himself. When frequenting Dakshineshwar, we saw him mimic woman's manners at times. These mimicries used to be so highly natural and perfect that even ladies were astonished to see them. At that time, the master sometimes went to the Jan Bazar house of Rani Rasmani and lived there with the ladies in the inner apartment, acquainted very well with the purity of the master's character and his freedom from every trace of lust. These ladies looked upon him as divine. Besides, they were now charmed with his womanly deportment and temperament, so sympathetically attuned to theirs. They thereafter got habituated to think of him as one amongst themselves and ceased to feel any womanly hesitation or bashfulness in his presence. When the husband of one of the Mathur's daughters came to Jan Bazar house at that time, the master, we have heard it from himself, decorated her with choicest dress and ornaments, dressed her hair, instructed her in various ways of entertaining her husband, led her by the hand like a woman friend to her husband's room, and returned after seating her by his side. He said, as they looked upon me as a woman friend of theirs, they did not feel uneasy at all. When he remained thus surrounded by ladies, Hriday said it was difficult even for his very close relatives to recognize him quickly. One day, at that time, Mathur Babu took me to the inner apartment and asked to Hriday, who was a very close relative of Sri Ramakrishna, can you say which one of these is your uncle? Hriday is telling, although I had lived with him for so long and had served him daily, I could not at once distinguish him from them. When during that period of his life at Dakshineshwar, uncle used to pluck and collect flowers in the garden early in the morning every day with a flower basket in his hand, we carefully observed him and we noticed that every time he started walking, his left leg, his left foot moved first like that of a woman. The Bhairavi Brahmani used to say, I mistook him very often for Sri Radharani. And when I saw him plucking flowers in that manner, having plucked flowers and made variegated garlands of them, he used to adorn Radha Govinda every day. And sometimes having adorned the mother, divine mother of the universe, also that way, he would pray imploringly to divine mother Kali, as did the gopis of Vraja, to Katyayani to let them have Krishna for his spiritual husband. So if you go to Vrindavan, even now, there is this temple of Divine Mother Katyayani, to whom all the gopis used to go and pray and give so many things. In return, they requested Divine Mother, prayed to Divine Mother that they should get Krishna as their husband. So even now that Katyayani temple is there, now here too, Ramakrishna, when he had taken this mood of the Radharani, he used to go make garlands to Mother Kali, adorn her, and then pray to her. He would pray imploringly to Mother Kali, as did the gopis of Vraja to Katyayani, to let him have Krishna for his spiritual husband. Desirous of having the vision of Krishna and of getting him as a spiritual husband, the master now performed the service and worship of the Divine Mother. He then engaged himself in the service of the holy feet of Krishna with an undivided mind and spent his days in eager prayer and longing. That eager prayer in his heart never ceased at any time, neither during the day nor during the night. Days and months passed without success, but neither despair nor any flagging of faith obstructed his urge. His prayer expressed itself as copious tears from the eyes and as a longing of the soul which developed into a restlessness, an anxious pining of the beloved like one possessed, making him unmindful of food, sleep, and other vital concerns of the body. And how shall we describe the pangs of separation, that unbounded yearning for the complete union of all time with one's darling of the heart, now cruelly obstructed by manifold barriers, that yearning which churns one's heart, plays havoc with one's mind, and devastates one's body and sense organ. How shall we describe the pangs produced by such a yearning? Further, these pangs of separation did not end by merely manifesting themselves as agonizing mental modes, but also brought about again that unbearable burning mental modes, but also brought about again that unbearable burning pain and intense heat which he had felt all over his body during the early stages of his sadhana. It came back. We have heard from the master himself that drops of blood oozed out then at times from every pore of his body under the powerful sense of separation from Lord Krishna. I'll repeat it again. We have heard from the master himself that drops of blood oozed out then at times from every pore of his body under the powerful sense of separation from Krishna. All the joints of the body seemed loosened or almost dislocated. The senses completely desisted from functioning, and the body lay motionless and unconscious, sometimes like that of a dead man, all because of the extreme anguish of the heart. You could see that in Mother Sita, while in Ashokavana, she was just like a dead body. Her only thought was Rama and Rama. People could see the body of mother was, she had given up food, everything. She was lying down there just like a dead body. Other than the thought of Rama, nothing was there. So like that, you can see all the joints of the body seemed loosened or almost dislocated. The senses completely desisted from functioning, and the body lay motionless and unconscious, sometimes like that of a dead man, all because of the extreme anguish of the heart, Sri Ramakrishna, while practicing this Madhura Bhava, that intense feeling from the separation of Lord Krishna. We, men eternally identified with the body and conscious of being that and that alone, understand by love the attraction of one body for another. Or if you go as a result of strenuous effort, just a little beyond the consciousness of the gross body and regard love as the attraction towards the aggregate of all noble qualities manifested in a particular body, we call it by the name of transcendental love and sing hallelujah over it. But it does not take long. It does not take one long to understand that even this, our so-called transcendental love, eulogized by generation of poets, is not free from the consciousness of the gross body and subtle desires for enjoyments. Ah, how worthless, insignificant, and hollow that love appears in contrast with the true transcendental love manifested in the Master's life. Srimati Radharani alone, the devotional scriptures say, realized this transcendental love in its fullness. In her, we have its perfect model. Nowhere in the world range of devotional scriptures is to be found appear to her, or completely oblivious of her own body and mental satisfaction. She could give up shame, hatred, fear without caring in the least for social or popular opinion. She could trample upon the prestige due to birth, family, good conduct, and respectable position in order to feel happy in Krishna's happiness alone. According to these Vaishnava scriptures, no jiva can attain to the fullness of this form of love. Only a partial realization of it can be had by the sadhaka, even that by the grace of Radharani alone. For Krishna, the embodiment of existence, knowledge, bliss, is eternally captivated by her love, devoid as it is of the slightest tinge of lust, and he fulfills the desire of the devotees of his vision at her intercession only. The implication of these teachings is that until one realizes the kind of love experienced by Srimati Radharani, the embodiment of transcendental love, one cannot have God as husband and feel the perfect sweetness of love, which is called Madhura Bhava. Now we shall close our discussion. I think of all the days of discussion of the great master is one of the toughest discussion to understand. So we will understand it if we repeatedly go through that. So now for today, we will end this discussion of this Madhura Bhava. We'll continue it on Sunday again. So until then, we will be meditating, we will be reading it again and again and try to understand what it is, think on it. So if you have any question, if you have any doubts about the today's discussion, feel free to ask.
Maharaj, Pranam Maharaj.
Yes, Madhusudan.
Today you said Upanishads and scriptures say you also need to have external emblems to realize God.
Yeah, while you are practicing that particular mode. Suppose you are a householder, you have to have that householder's thing. Shanta Bhava, it is Shanta Bhava. So whichever you are in, suppose I am a sannyasin, now I cannot wear other dress and be there. I have to wear Vedanta, according to the Vedanta in this thing, I have to wear the Girva cloth. I am doing that. A person who is practicing the householder's life, just like in the Vedas, doing Homa, Havana, Yaga, Yagna, he has to wear the Janevu, the tuft of hair and other things meant for that. A person who is working in the office like a boss, he has to wear the suit, boot, and the tie and other things, which is the formal dress according to them. You can't go to the office, your office, just with informals like your T-shirt and jeans pant or something with a Bermuda or something like that. You have some what do you call that traditional dress you have to wear there to the office, to every work. If you are a plumber, you have to have a pant and the shirt which will have so many pockets to keep all those bits and nuts and spawners and other things. So a cowherd will have his own dress. So it is just like that.
But it's not a necessity, right, Maharaj? You should have it, but is it necessary to have the realization? It's not a must.
No, when it becomes intense, then you yourself, the mind will guide you. Nothing to worry. Don't worry. As you become intense in your spiritual life, the internal guru, your mind, and the Lord Himself will guide you. The important thing is you should increase your earnestness and become deep. As you go deeper, the Lord will guide you. Do not worry about that.
Okay. Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah. As of now, with our intensity, it suffices as we are. We can move forward with the dress as we are. When we go deeper and deeper, automatically the Lord will show you. Nothing to worry. Yeah. Any other questions? Any other doubts? I think it was so tough today. People will have so many doubts they cannot ask. Okay, I'll close the session with a prayer. Om Priyatam Pundarikakshaha Sarvayagneswaro Harihi Tasmin Tushte Jagat Tushtam Prenite Prenitam Jagat Harihi Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.